Welcome back to the Storybook Nook. Tonight's story takes us to the quiet town of Sugarbell, where Mrs. Puddingworth and her lovable tabby cat Sprinkles are hard at work getting ready for their yearly tradition of revealing their famous cookie castle. But when it's time to reveal the cookie castle, they realize it has been taken. Who did it? Why did they do it? Will they get the cookie castle back in time for Christmas? Let's settle in, snuggle up, and let the magic of the Storybook Nook carry you into the story of the Christmas cookie caper. In the cozy town of Sugarbell, nestled beneath twinkling snow-covered hills, Christmas was the most magical time of the year. At the heart of the town stood a small bakery, Sweet Treats and Magic Eats, famous for its Christmas cookies. The bakery was run by Mrs. Puddingworth, a jolly baker with rosy cheeks, and her mischievous but lovable tabby cat, Sprinkles. This year, the townsfolk were especially excited because Mrs. Puddingworth was preparing her legendary Christmas cookie castle, a towering masterpiece made of gingerbread walls, sugar glass windows, and decorated with the finest candy from every corner of the world. But something unexpected was about to happen that would turn this peaceful Christmas into a thrilling adventure. It was Christmas Eve, and the whole town gathered outside the bakery to get a glimpse of the cookie castle before it was unveiled. The scent of cinnamon, nutmeg, and freshly baked gingerbread filled the air. Excited whispers filled the crowd as Mrs. Puddingworth stepped outside in her flour-dusted apron. "Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's time," she said, opening the doors of the bakery and leading the people inside. Mrs. Puddingworth stood proudly beside the display and pulled back the red curtain to reveal her masterpiece. But the cookie castle was gone. "Oh, crumbs!" Mrs. Puddingworth exclaimed, her hands flying to her cheeks. "Who could have taken the castle?" Everyone started talking at once. "Could it have been the Frost Goblins?" asked Timmy, a boy with a wild imagination. "Or maybe Jack Frost himself," suggested Emily, clutching her scarf tighter. Sprinkles, the tabby cat, sniffed the air and let out a determined meow. He pawed at Mrs. Puddingworth's skirt and pointed with his tail towards the snowy woods. "You think the thief went that way?" Mrs. Puddingworth asked. Sprinkles nodded, his golden eyes sparkling with determination. Mrs. Puddingworth didn't hesitate. "Timmy, Emily, and anyone brave enough, come with me. We're going to find the cookie castle." The children eagerly joined her, bundling up in coats, hats, and scarves. Sprinkles led the way, his little paws leaving a trail in the snow. As they ventured deeper into the woods, strange clues began to appear. First, they found a trail of gumdrops glistening in the moonlight. Then, a piece of frosting-covered candy cane stuck to a tree branch. Finally, they reached a clearing where they discovered tiny footprints, too small for a person, but just at the right size for elves. "Oh, fiddlesticks! I bet it's those mischief-making North Pole elves," Mrs. Puddingworth said. "They've probably taken my castle for a Christmas prank." As they followed the trail of crumbs and candy deeper into the woods, the group suddenly heard giggles. Peeking through the bushes, they saw a group of tiny elves in bright green outfits. They were gathered around the cookie castle, laughing and tossing gumdrops into their mouths. "Hey, those are my cookies!" Mrs. Puddingworth called out, stepping into the clearing. The elves froze, their mouths full of candy. One stepped forward nervously. "We're sorry, Mrs. Puddingworth," he squeaked. "We didn't mean to steal it." We just wanted to borrow the cookie castle to make our Christmas party extra special. The North Pole is so far away, and we thought we'd bring some Sugarbell magic to our celebration." Mrs. Puddingworth's stern face softened. "Borrowing without asking is still wrong," she said, "but I understand. Christmas is about sharing and joy. Tell you what," Mrs. Puddingworth continued, "if you help me bring the cookie castle back to Sugarbell, we'll host a big Christmas party for everyone, elves and townsfolk alike." The elves' eyes lit up, and they eagerly agreed. Working together, they carefully loaded the cookie castle onto a sled and pulled it back to the bakery. The townspeople cheered as the castle was returned to its rightful place. That night, the bakery was filled with laughter, music, and the sweet smell of cookies. The elves shared their favorite North Pole treats, while Mrs. Puddingworth taught them how to bake Sugarbell's famous Christmas cookies. The children listened to stories about Santa's workshop, and even Sprinkles joined the fun, batting around a jingling ornament. As the clock struck midnight, Santa himself appeared, his sleigh landing gracefully in the snowy street. "Ho, ho! Ho! What's this?" he said, his eyes twinkling as he admired the cookie castle. "It's a special Christmas party, thanks to Mrs. Puddingworth and the Sugarbell elves," Timmy explained. Santa smiled. "You've truly captured the spirit of Christmas, sharing, forgiveness, and togetherness." He handed Mrs. Puddingworth a golden cookie cutter shaped like a star, for the best baker in all the land. As the party wound down and the townspeople returned home, Mrs. Puddingworth looked around at the happy faces and felt her heart swell with joy. She turned to Sprinkles and said, "This has been the sweetest Christmas yet." Sprinkles purred in agreement, his tail swishing contentedly. And so, the Great Christmas Cookie Caper became a beloved story in Sugarbell, reminding everyone that the magic of Christmas is best shared with friends, old and new. Thanks for joining us at the Storybook Nook. Remember to like and subscribe so you never miss a bedtime story. Sweet dreams, sleep well, and see you next time for a new story.